previously.
It was bent under this way. I got it pulled out and it still looks like garbage right now.
So I ended up cutting part of the outer panel. That way I can get access to the inside of the inner panel. That way I can get everything hammered out back into its original shape.
This is kind of what I got.
So once everything was nice and straight again, I welded the outer panel back into its place. Then followed up with the body filler over bigger imperfections, got everything sanded, primed, and painted. Now let's fix the hood.
This is what the other side looks like. Nice and straight, and this is all whack.
Aluminum hoods are pretty expensive to replace, so fixing the original one seemed like the right option. Guys, in this episode, I will go ahead and finish the hood with body filler and primer, and then I'll get the whole nose prepped and painted, and then it's on to the assembly.
So once all of your body filler work is done, next step would be to apply some primer. Now, what does primer do? Primer is essentially another, like the very last coat of really thin body filler. It's just a spray on filler, and then once you lay it down, what it's gonna do is it will hide a lot of the small imperfections, it'll cover a lot of the sandpaper scratches, and then also, it will allow you to make that transition, smooth transition from your work area onto the existing panel. So this way, later on, once everything's painted and you look at it, you don't see that kind of a rough transition, but it's going to be smooth. So it's pretty much your last ditch effort to fix all of the minor imperfections in your work. So after scuffing down that area, I went, good 4, maybe 5 inches out, and you see it's nice and dull. You don't want to have any of this, shiny reflective surface anywhere where you're going to be putting down your primer. So it is the next day and the primer is nice and dry, so I'm gonna go ahead and sand it down. But before that, I want to apply some guide coat, and I'm not actually gonna use an actual guide coat. I'm just gonna use black primer, and the reason being is this is a light color grade primer, and this is a black primer, so it's not really gonna clog up the paper any more than gray primer would. Now, the thing that I probably wouldn't use is the paint in a spray can, because that stuff will clog up your sandpaper. I'm just gonna really lightly mist this stuff on and be done. Whenever I block primer, I would normally use one of 2 different grits of sandpaper, either 400 grit or 600. Now, I would use the 400 grit on the car that has a lighter color. 400 grit sandpaper scratches will be a little bit more noticeable, but they will be less noticeable on a lighter colored vehicle after the paint. And then if you've got a car that's black or dark green, dark blue, or burgundy in color, it's a darker color, and darker colors will show the imperfections that much more than you would see them on a lighter colored car. So if you're working on a dark colored car, use a 600 grit paper. So you pretty much have to block everything until the guide coat is gone, because once it's gone, then you know you're done. So everyone's got their own style when it comes to working on cars or painting them. And the thing that I like to do is, whenever I'm painting something, I like pulling the parts that I'm about to paint off the vehicle. Main reason I do that is because I hate masking the car, because it's very time consuming and it's very tedious work. Now, obviously, if it takes forever to remove a certain part off, then it's easier to just go ahead and mask it off. But since I've been working in this area and most of the parts are loose anyway, like this fender, I can just pull it off because it's not bolted down. It's a lot easier for me to just yank it off, paint it, and then put it back on the car once I'm done. And hoods are also really easy to remove. All it is just 4 bolts. That way you don't have to mask off the whole car just to paint one hood. And also you have access to the back side, so this way you can walk all the way around the hood as you're painting it. But if it's mounted, then obviously you got a car in the way and you cannot do that. Quick pro tip for you: if you're going to be doing some wet sanding outside, there's going to be water splashing around and then your feet will get soaked. So if you want to stay dry, go ahead and throw some plastic bags, you know, just right over your shoes, so this way nothing's gonna get soaked. So as I said earlier, everyone's got their own way of doing things, their own style. So normally what I like to do is, if I got a new or used part that I'm totally repainting, I like to scuff it down, cover it with sealer, and then start laying down my base coat and then my clear coat. However, if I'm doing just a partial paint on a panel, or if I'm blending onto a panel, what I like to do is, instead of using 400 or 600 grit sandpaper, I like to use this stuff called final sand and a Scotch-Brite to prep my panels for paint. So all you gotta do is you just gotta squeeze some of this final sand stuff out. It's just this gooey substance that has some grit to it, and it also works as a soap in a way, so this way it'll take off all of the dirt, the oils, the wax and whatnot off of the surface. As usual, before paint, gotta use some wax and grease remover. You want to get the whole panel nice and wet. Don't leave any dry spots behind. This way you know you got a 100% coverage. And with a clean dry rag, you want to get all of this stuff off. I will go ahead and put down some sealer, so I will seal them first and then I'll be putting down some base coat and clear. And now onto my favorite part of the whole project, the reassembly. And as usual, there's a surprise. So while I was performing the assembly, I saw that there was a rip in this wiring covering, and I took a peek inside, and what do you know? We got some wires that are split right here, and then just to make sure, I started looking down, I kind of followed the wires down and saw there was more broken wires. Good thing I looked, because later on I would have had a hell of a time trying to figure out why some of the things aren't working, and I would have had a hard time tracking down this issue. But since I know where it is now, it's time to fix it. So next step would be to mount a lower airbox. However, there's a problem. As you can see, the spout has a big old crack right in there, and it's barely hanging on. I mean, it's still there, but this is pretty significant. And also I got a broken off mount that goes right in here like so. Now the original lower airbox smashed to pieces, so I ended up getting this one for just a few bucks. So I will need few strips of this plastic, anywhere between 1/8 of an inch to about 3/16, or let's say about 3 to 4 millimeters wide. Now, if I were to try and cut this plastic the way it is, it would be really hard, because this plastic is pretty thick and it's pretty rigid. So the easy way to do this would be to preheat this plastic first. Once it's preheated, it's going to be very malleable. So something sort of like this. Now I'm going to have to make a groove all the way along this crack. Hope you guys can see the groove. That has to be done all the way around, because the crack continues all out here. So I had to groove it on both sides, so this way our filler plastic would have somewhere to go and it wouldn't end up just on the surface. And here's the groove that I made on that bracket. It's kind of hard to see because I cannot keep it in place, but you get the idea. To do this repair, I'm going to use this hot air station. You guys don't have to have the same thing, but this is just what I had sitting around. Since the spout doesn't want to go back into its original position, but it kind of springs back, I will go ahead and bridge this area somewhere, so this way at least this thing will stay where it's supposed to be. I'm gonna preheat the area first, but don't overdo it because you don't want to burn it. And then you want to warm up the piece you'll be working with, and then you want to kind of just melt it into the crack. Just want to push it in as it melts. So while this area is cooling, I can start working on the other side. You want the plastic on the base material to be pretty warm so it can accept the new melting plastic. Otherwise, if you just put hot strip over a cold base, it will not adhere. Same goes for welding and metals. It's the same principle. Once everything is nice and hot, you just push the strip right into that groove, and as it melts, it'll make its way in. And if you're wearing gloves, you can kind of help push the material in. It's almost like a Play-Doh. So here's the end result. This is the bracket that I welded back on. And here's the spout. Now, is this a strong repair? Well, yeah, this thing is holding up just fine, so I don't see it going anywhere. It's actually really strong. So if you guys are repairing like a headlight housing or plastic box like this, or even a plastic bumper, best thing to use is the original material that you can cut up into strips and use that as your filler material. This is the bracket that I just fixed, so let's see how well. I'm really yanking on this box and this thing is holding up like a champ.
Finally getting the car down from the frame rack.
Alrighty, so this is the final result. Bodywork and paint turned out great. Everything looks really good. Hood repair turned out great. There's no waves in it. Everything is nice, flat and straight. So the outside is done, but I have to do some more work on the inside. So the video of that will be out in just a couple of days. So stay tuned for that. And then in the meanwhile, don't forget to click that like button. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, and I will see you soon.